Hey, it's Jack, no K, Jack in the Attic, and it's time for the long overdue mesh X-stitch cardigan tutorial. Now, off the top, this is going to be for intermediate crocheters. It is going to be very choose your own adventure style. This whole thing is made to measure. I will go over, obviously, any complicated stitch patterns like the X stitch itself I will go over in great detail. I will also put that specific section in the description as well as the sleeve decreases, because I think those are the most complicated parts that you would probably need to reference written out. Everything else is just going to be in the video. I am not a pattern writer. That's not something I do. It's not something I'm going to be doing. So this tutorial really is just how to make the whole thing. And honestly, it's rough. I have never made a video tutorial before. This is brand new to me. So we're really in this together. I also must acknowledge, obviously, that this is heavily inspired by an existing pattern. It is a free pattern from Yarnspirations. I reference it all the time because I wear my version of it all the time. This is the Crochet Mesh Cardigan by Yarnspirations. I will of course link the free pattern below. There are enough differences that I feel comfortable putting this tutorial out, but if you're wanting something closer to the original, or the original straight up, definitely check it out. I think it's a good pattern. I just wanted something a little bit different. So the differences between my version, which my version is 3 versions, I will go ahead and show the 2 that I have physically. I will show little clips here so you can see what they look like. I've made a long version with very oversized and shorter sleeves with a button band, and I made the shorter version a little bit more fitted and with the tie in the front. The other version I made is a cropped but still slightly oversized version with the button band. I'll put in a separate clip of that right now. I doubt it's super visible with all the layers, but here it is. I'm really pleased with it. I think it came out really well. Because I gave that away, it was a birthday gift. I don't have it anymore, so that old clip is all I have. So the differences between mine and the original, mine has different decreasing for the neckline. I found a different decreasing method. Mine does not have any shoulder shaping. It is a little bit more of like a gender neutral cut, I think, the way that it hangs. It is more, I think, suited to be oversized. The original has a lot of shoulder shaping and the arm's eye is specifically shaped. This does not have that. It's a lot of straight lines. They also have different sleeve shapes. This one, I think I didn't do any sleeve shaping at all. I just did a big wide sleeve. I will show you how I did the sleeve shaping for my other version. Mine has the optional ribbing and button band. Mine is completely no sew. Again, I do still love the original pattern, so this is not anything against that pattern. I just think having different options is good. So overall, we have a more fitted, more shaped garment, a more oversized, more drapey garment. You do you. So I'm gonna get into the tutorial now. Second reminder that it is rough. If you have questions, obviously feel free to ask them below. I will do everything I can to help out. Let's go.
Okay, so starting with the yarn and hook that I'm using Hobbii Twister Solid. If you know me, I use this all the time. This is a 4mm hook, but I think I'm going to size up to a 4.5, which is actually what the yarn recommends. So I would recommend starting with the hook size recommended on your yarn. You can use a sport weight or a DK to get something closest to what I made, but you can really make this with any weight yarn. So first we're going to make a swatch for two reasons. First is just to see if you like how it looks with the hook size you've chosen. Second is to see how much this bottom like foundation row shrinks. Mine started at about 5 inches and it shrunk down to about 4¼ So I'm going to make a swatch with you now so that you can see the stitch pattern. And you can start that swatch with either a row of single crochets or half double crochets. This will be the bottom of your cardigan. If you want to add ribbing later, you absolutely can. I will show you how to do that. But just important to know, this is going to be the bottom of your cardigan. So whatever stitch you choose for that foundation row will just depend on how you want that to look. Switching to a larger yarn in a different color so that you can see it better. I used a foundation half double crochet. You can just chain and then do the stitches into the chain, or you can do a foundation chain. Either way, it does not matter. Whatever you prefer is fine. I did 17 half double crochets. You want it to be a multiple of 3 plus 2. So I did 15 plus 2. And that will be how you start your cardigan as well, a multiple of 3 plus 2. So for the swatch, get your foundation row and then we will start. I'm going to start with a chain of 4. This will take the place of a treble crochet. I'm trying not to chain too tight because I don't want the edges to warp. So we're going to skip this first stitch because this is counting as a triple crochet in this stitch. So we're going to move on to this stitch. This is where we're going to yarn over twice, go into that second stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. So you have 3 loops on the hook. Going to yarn over again, skip 1 stitch, go into the next stitch. This is why we're doing multiples of 3. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. We're going to do that 4 times. So yarn over, pull through 2 for the second time, yarn over, pull through 2 a third time, yarn over, pull through 2 the 4th time. Then chain 1, then you yarn over, and here you're going to see in this middle section there are 2 loops that are kind of twisted to the front. So you are actually going to go through sideways the front of what would be the center of the X stitch. And we'll go over this multiple times, so don't worry too much. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And that is your first X stitch. So let's do that again. The X's are going to be right next to each other. You won't skip chains between the X's, but you will skip 1 stitch in between the legs of the X. So we're going to yarn over twice, go into this next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, skip a stitch between the legs of the X, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, then we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 4 times. So yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2 a second time, yarn over, pull through 2 the 3rd time, yarn over, pull through 2 4th time. Now we have kind of an upside down Y. Going to chain 1, yarn over once, in the center of what will become the X right here, I'm going to go through the front 2 loops sideways. I am guilty of using my fingers to help manipulate the yarn all the time. Don't worry about it. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, and there's the second X stitch. Let's do it one more time. Yarn over twice, right into the next stitch. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. Then, with 3 stitches on the hook, yarn over again, skip a stitch, into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, do that 3 more times, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. To create the top of the X, chain 1, then we yarn over, we go sideways through the front of the intersection of the X, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So let's get to the end of the row, and I'll show you how to end the row. Okay, so we have done the X stitch down the length of this foundation row, and there's 1 stitch left. So to end the row, you're just going to put 1 treble crochet in that final stitch. This side is again kind of wonky. That will even itself out. So to continue your swatch, I recommend you do at least 3 or 4 rows to really know how much this is going to shrink. So we flip it over. I'm going to chain 4, just like we did on the first row, and make our first X stitch segment, I guess, into the right top leg of the X. So I've yarned over twice, I'm going to go into the top of the right leg, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, skip the middle, I'm going to go into the top of the left leg now. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, 4 times, chain 1 to create the top of the X, yarn over, through the middle of the upside down Y, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So you're stacking the X's directly on top of each other. So let's do that again. Yarn over twice, go into the top of the right leg of that stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over into the top of the left leg, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 2 4 times, chain 1 to create the top of the X, yarn over, go through the center, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. If you prefer a written out version of the X stitch, it is written out, I think, really well in the original pattern. I would recommend taking a look at that either way. So we're going to continue the X stitches, and then at the end we're just going to put 1 treble crochet into the top of this chain. It is coming as a complete surprise to me that it's actually very hard to do this looking through the camera. So I have reached the end of my row. I put an X stitch into every X stitch from the previous row. I'm going to yarn over twice, put a treble crochet into this top chain from the chain 4 of the previous row. I am horrible at crocheting into chains, so yours will look better than that. Okay, so I'm going to do probably 2 more rows, then come back and measure to see if my swatch has shrunk at all. Okay, I finished my 4th row of X stitches, and now I'm going to measure and see how much width I lost. I know I lost some. This started at 6 inches. Oh wow, and now it's at 5. We lost an entire inch. Okay, so that's going to be very important to know, because next we're going to create the foundation row for the entire garment. So to give an idea of the construction of the garment, I'm going to draw it on a sticky note. So we're going to start crocheting at the very bottom of the garment, unless you want to add ribbing. So just imagine there could be ribbing down here if you want, but we're basically going to crochet a rectangle. Oh, I smeared it. And this is the width of the entire circumference of your body. So you want the very bottom foundation row to go all the way around your chest or the widest part of your torso comfortably, plus any desired ease, plus some to account for the shrinkage. So after we crochet the rectangle for the body, we're going to basically split into thirds, and we're going to crochet just the back, and then we're going to crochet just the front sides. Right? This is not a good drawing, but I hope it's clear. So we're going to make just this bottom rectangle now, and then I'll come back and show you the next steps. So again, you're going to either chain the length that you want to go around your torso, plus ease, plus enough to account for whatever your shrinkage ratio is. I know for mine, in this yarn, I lose 1 inch for every 6 inches that I chain. And for this yarn, I lose 3/4 of an inch for every 5 inches. So you're going to want to get those numbers for yourself from your swatch and account that in to your starting chain for the cardigan. And remember, for the first row, you're going to chain and then start working into the very next stitch. You're going to skip a stitch between the legs of the X, treble crochet into the final stitch. Every row after that, you're going to work into the top of the legs of the previous X stitch. So chain 4, X stitch into the top of the right leg, top of the left leg. You don't skip anything between the X's only between the legs of the X, treble crochet into the final stitch. And you're going to want to create the panel that is the length you want the cardigan to be under the armholes specifically. So I'm going to come back with a very large rectangle of X stitches just up to where I want to split for the armholes. Wait, okay, one more thing before I go. If you want to do ribbing, maybe a button band on the front of the cardigan, you'll want to account for that in your foundation row as well. Okay, that's it. I will see you later. Okay, so I did indeed switch to a 5mm crochet hook, and I am done with my bottom panel. I'm going to make mine quite cropped with kind of a wide sleeve, so my bottom panel is pretty short. I am going to zoom out so you can really see this whole situation. So I have this long panel. The next step is going to be adding the back panel. Remember the vision. Okay. So to figure out where I'm going to add the back panel, I'm going to fold this basically how it's going to be worn. Like this, but actually correct. So I'm going to fold it in half. A good way to make sure that the fold is exact is to line up the spaces between the X stitches. As long as those are lined up, you'll know that you have the exact middle. I'm going to put a stitch marker there for now. It's not going to stay there for too long. So for me, the middle is actually between two X stitches. For you, it might be the center of an X stitch. Okay, so that's the very center. Zooming back out. Then I'm going to take each side and match it up with that center. This is, of course, a little bit hard to see with black yarn, but I have just the ends matched up with the center. So now I can put a stitch marker here and here so that I know the back panel is between these two stitch markers. And again, I'm going to line up the opening between the X stitches so I know I have the exact middle. And the exact middle for me is, again, between two X stitches. For you, it might be the center of an X stitch, just depending on how many you have, whether it's an even or odd number. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. Okay, so opening it back up, I can take this center stitch marker off. So here you can see that the back panel is going to be between these stitch markers. That would be this section. This back panel right here is going to be between these stitch markers, and these stitch markers actually mark where the bottom of the armhole is going to be. So because we want the back panel to start and end with a treble crochet the same way the bottom panel did, it's going to depend on where your stitch marker is where you start. So because my stitch marker is in between two X stitches, I'm going to have a little bit more of a gap, but that will get filled by sleeve. That's not going to be a problem. So I'm actually going to start on the left leg. Let me zoom in. I'm actually going to start on the left leg of the X stitch to the left of my stitch marker. And then when I'm doing the front panel, I'm going to start on the right leg of the X stitch to the right of my stitch marker. So that is going to leave this center section with nothing in it. And again, that's totally okay. That's just going to become part of the sleeve. If your stitch marker is in the center of an X, you can start your back panel just to the left of that on that left leg and start your front panel on the right leg. So I'm going to start right here with a treble crochet and then X stitch into every X stitch until we get to this second stitch marker. And then I'm going to end with a treble crochet on the right leg of the X stitch to the right of my stitch marker. If your stitch marker is in the center of an X, you will continue and put your final treble crochet in the right leg of the X that your stitch marker is in. So now I'm going to join my yarn and do my first treble crochet. I put a slip knot on my hook for this. You don't have to do this. I'm paranoid about my stitches falling out. So for the first treble crochet, it's actually just going to be a chain 4. And then I will X stitch into the next. Okay, so hopefully this gives a little bit of a clearer idea of what I was talking about. In the left leg of whichever X is to the left of my stitch marker, just doing 1 treble crochet, which in the beginning is just a chain 4, X stitching into every X until we come to the stitch marker on the other side. So let me zoom out and do that. Okay, I have now X stitched all the way across in between these 2 stitch markers, and now we're at the second stitch marker. I'm going to zoom in. So because again my stitch marker is between 2 X's, I'm going to stop a little bit early at the first leg of the X before my stitch marker. I'm going to put my final treble crochet right here. So now my first row is done. I'm going to turn my work, chain 4, and continue in the exact same way that we did the bottom panel. And I'm going to make my back panel pretty long. Again, I want to have a relatively wide sleeve. More of this length is going to be dedicated to armhole than to the section under the armhole, right? You see how we're doing jazz here? It's all about the stitches you don't make, I guess. Anyway, I'm going to work on the back panel. It's just a straight rectangle. There's no shaping on the back panel, and I will come back when that is done. And for yours, the back panel should be the length of how long you want your armhole to be, which is totally up to you. I would always err on the side of a little bit bigger. We are going to do arm shaping, optional arm shaping. So if you end up with a sleeve that is a little too wide for your liking, you can absolutely taper it down. And we'll go over that more in the sleeve section, but the setup for the sleeve is kind of important. So I'll be back when my back panel is finished. Okay, I have my back panel finished. As you can see, my armhole is going to be significantly wider than the length of the bottom panel. That is intentional. Also, I can't remember if I said this out loud or if I just thought it, but I am trying to make a slightly more fitted version. This fabric does have a good amount of stretch, but I don't want it to be like skin tight. Anyway, it's time to move on to the front panels. If you're smarter than me, you could have started with the front panels and it would be one less time you would have to join the yarn and weave in another end, but I am not smarter than me, so I didn't do that. So the front panels are the only section of the main body where there is decreasing. So I will show you how to do the decreasing. The rate at which you decrease is going to be completely up to you. Let's reference the sticky note drawings again. Let me zoom in. So you can absolutely, if this is the side of your front panel, this is the armhole, you can absolutely do a long, slow decrease that you start at the very beginning. You can do short, rapid decrease further up. That is totally up to you. So the number of rows that you crochet before you start decreasing is going to be a personal choice. But I will show you how to do the decreasing and then you choose the rate. Usually I decrease every other row and it ends up looking more like this one. So most likely I am going to crochet probably 2 or 3 rows before I start decreasing. But let me show you how to do the decreases and then I'll start on that. I'm going to show the decreases on this test swatch again because it's much easier to see. So this is another place where it deviates from the original pattern that this is based on. So here is how I decrease. And in this example, this is the inside of the cardigan and this is the side that's attached to the back. So we're going to start the same as always with a chain 4. And then we're going to start the next X stitch normally, the same way we've been doing. Sorry, my fingers are orange. I just ate a bunch of oranges, that's why. So we're actually going to stop at this upside down Y, this like Eiffel Tower shape, instead of a full X. That way, on the next row, we're going to put our final treble crochet here, and that decreases 1X. Let me finish this row and show you the next row. Okay, so at the end of this row, you can see we did our first chain 4, a partial X stitch, and then we did our regular X stitches across the row and ended with a treble crochet. So turning around, we're going to treat this as a normal row until we get to the end here. Okay, so I'm almost at the end of my row. You can see where these intersect. We're just going to put 1 treble crochet here. Technically, we would usually end at this top of the chain, but it is not going to matter. And there you go. You can see we've made 1 decrease. And this little ledge section here will even out when you either add ribbing or do like a half double or single crochet around the borders of everything. So this will look a little bit stair-steppy, but it will even itself out. So when I turn again, I didn't do any decreasing on this row. I am going to do 1 more of these decreases here. So again, we're starting our X stitch the same way we normally would. We just don't continue when we get to the top. We don't do the chain 1, yarn over, going through the middle section. We just leave it as this upside down Y stitch, so that instead of 3 stitches up at the top, we only have this one. I'm going to continue in the row with my X stitches. Okay, I have now decreased twice. I'm going to turn back around and do a treble crochet, X, 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 treble crochet, and that is the end of that row. Okay, so now you can see another decrease. So we started with these 5 X stitches and 2 trebles on the end. We worked down one of the X's into nothing. Basically, it takes 2 rows with this method to decrease from 5 X's to 4, and then another 2 rows to go from 4 to 3. There is the other method of decreasing where you decrease twice as fast. I will show you that one. I am only going to rip back to this row where we did our first start of a decrease. I'm actually not even going to go that far. So here you can see we have the first decrease row, and then I flipped and did the X stitches normally. So I have one more X stitch to do here. But I'm actually going to do another one of these partial X stitches in this space. So we have the partial X stitch, and I'm going to put a treble crochet in the top of the partial X stitch from the previous row. I'm going to do it right this time. There we go. And so here we have a more drastic decrease. We went from 5 X's to 4.5 down to 3.5 in 2 rows. Let me show you another row. I'm going to chain 4 again. So because we have chained 4, we're actually going to skip this first partial X completely. We're going to go into this first X and do another partial X. And here we go. So that's another decrease row. I'm going to do these 2 X's normally. Okay, so here you can see this second decrease method for a more rapid, dramatic decrease. That would be this one. So what I'm going to do with my side panel, oh, we're getting a third sticky note. So what I'm going to do with my side panel, I have the back, the armhole. I am going to crochet, again, just a couple of rows normally, and then I'm going to start a gradual decrease that goes all the way to the top of my side panel. And I just want my side panel to be as long as my back panel. So I will just keep decreasing until I get to the same row count as my back panel. You can do actually several different things. So if this is your back panel, underarm, front panel, you can crochet regular full rows for as long as you want, and then do that drastic decrease. You can also start with any type of decrease and then crochet straight up without any decreases. So, ton of options. You can really do whatever you think you would prefer, but the basic idea is you're going to do some number of decreases on that front panel to create the V shape for the front of the neck. So I'm going to start my front panel on my actual piece, and I'll show you how that looks. Okay, so here is the stitch marker from when I originally separated the bottom panel into back and front panels. So I'm going to join here at the right corner with a chain 4. I'm going to X stitch all the way down this row, and then when we get to my stitch marker, because my stitch marker is in the middle of 2 X's, I'm going to stop and put my final treble crochet in the right leg of the X stitch right in front of the stitch marker. If your stitch marker is in the middle of an X, you will still stop at the right leg right before your stitch marker. So I'll go ahead and do that row. I'll come back and show you how that looks. Okay, I lost track and went too far and had to rip back a stitch, and that's totally fine. So wow, it's really hard to do that through the camera. Anyway, I am at the X right before my stitch marker, so I'm going to stop at this X. I'm going to put my final treble crochet on the right leg of the X before my stitch marker. So that is my first row of my front panel. You can see here what I was talking about, the bottom of the armhole going to be a little bit wider because my stitch marker was in the middle of 2 X's instead of the middle of 1 X, and that is totally fine. So I am going to do the exact same thing back again, just a regular row of X stitch with treble crochets at the end, and then on my third row I'm going to start doing the gradual decrease, where I decrease on every row that starts on the right. Every row starts on the right. I'm going to decrease on every row that starts on the inside and not on any of the sides that start on the back or next to the back. If you want, you can move your stitch marker to the side you're going to be doing your decreases on so that you remember. And because there is no shoulder shaping, we're not doing any decreases on the side close to the back, only on this side. So again, you can decrease every other row, you can decrease every row, you can experiment with decreasing every third row, every fourth row. That is totally up to you. It will change the slope of this decrease, but as long as you do some decreases, it's totally fine. So I'm going to finish my side panel, and then I will come back and we will do the same thing backwards on the other side. Okay, so it looks kind of wobbly, but I have my right front panel done. Actually, I'm doing this whole thing inside out, so this is technically going to be my left front panel, but it does not matter at the moment. So I have this panel done. You can see I have kind of a long section at the bottom, and then I did the gradual every other row decrease. So now I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. You can see I already went and did the sleeve, but that's so I could remember how everything goes before I try to tell anyone how it goes. Okay, so this is how I had the body of the cardigan set up when I started my other front side. If I wanted these stitches to be exactly consistent, I would flip this whole thing around so that I'm crocheting them mirrored. If that's not something you're worried about, don't start worrying about it now. It is not a big deal. You can do the two sides identical, just make sure the decreases are done on the inside, not on the side with the sleeve. I am actually going to do the inverted way, just in case you do want to do that. I'll show how that is done. It is the exact same process, but instead of starting the row with the decrease, you will end a row with the decrease. Because I started my other side with 2 regular rows, that would be starting here, 1 row this way, 1 row this way,
my third row would be my first decrease row. So I would be going this way and then do my decrease at the very end instead of at the beginning. Let's grab the example again. So here we have the less gradual decrease, the every row decrease, starting from this side. I'm going to unravel some of that so that I can use this as an example for the inverted method. Okay, so the inverted method, originally the open inside of the cardigan, where the button band would be if there was one, was this side. But now we're looking at the other side, so the inside is this side. So we're going to be doing the decrease here instead of here. I hope that makes sense. So you do your normal rows, then you start your row normally, and then you get to the very last X stitch, and you're going to put a Y, upside down Y stitch in that X. So we have one upside down Y stitch, and then we'll do one treble crochet in the top loop of this chain 4 from the previous row. And that is one decrease. So I would do, for the slow sloping decrease method, I would do a normal row here, and then on my next row back, I would do another decrease at the end of the row, and I would just continue that pattern. For the less gradual decrease, you would flip this around and do another decrease here the same way we did before. That would be to chain 4. And we basically skip this Y stitch as if it's not there. And for the less gradual increase, we would do another Y stitch here so that you're decreasing on every row. If you're doing the more gradual decrease, sorry, you would just do a regular X stitch here. So that way you're decreasing one X instead of 2. And again, the decrease frequency is totally up to you and how you want your cardigan to look. But this is how you decrease at the end of a row instead of the beginning of the row. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other front panel for my cardigan, and then we'll come back and talk about sleeves. Here is my first sleeve. Zoomed in for texture. Here's my first sleeve. The sleeves are not hard, they just take a long time. One thing about the sleeves I do want you to start thinking about now is that there is a line of treble crochets that's going to be down the center of either the top or the bottom. I put mine on top because these treble crochets are going to be exactly opposite from the decreases, and I would rather see this than the decreases. However, the decreases are not anything really obtrusive. They are just some upside down Y stitches worked into the pattern to decrease the number of X stitches per row really gradually. I think it's one fewer X stitch every other row. So that's a really gradual sleeve decrease. I think it looks really natural. But we will talk more about the sleeves later. I will come back when my front side is finished, and I will show you how to attach those to the top to make the shoulders. Okay, I have my second front panel completed. You can see here I did one extra row on the front panel for a little extra like chest room. You don't have to do that, totally optional. So as you can see, I've already finished the other entire half of the cardigan. So now we're just going to make this side
match that. So I'm just going to fold this over. I'm not showing that very well. So I'm going to match up the holes between the X stitches. And you can use stitch markers to keep this in place, but you're going to slip stitch along the top through both layers, front and back, to attach these to each other. If you have made these pieces in a more logical order than I did, you can absolutely start at one end and slip stitch all the way across the back. The extra slip stitches at the back of the neck are not going to be in the way. They're not going to do anything extra or bad. They really couldn't hurt. So if you want to slip stitch all the way across the entire back, that's totally fine. All that matters is that you end at the start of a sleeve, because the next thing we're going to do is half double crochet around the opening where the sleeve is going to go. So because I did this in the wrong order, it is totally okay that my working yarn is on the inside, because I'm going to slip stitch out and then half double crochet around the armhole. So let's get started there. I'm going to flip it over so that I can work right to left. Okay, so here's that top shoulder bit lined up. I line up the holes between the X stitches so that I can really see that everything is where it's supposed to be. And I'm just going to slip stitch everything together. Because this ends with a treble crochet, I'm just going to start in the left arm of the corresponding X, but it kind of doesn't really matter as long as you get it even and not ripply. It's not going to be a huge deal. After that first treble crochet, it's easier to line up the X stitches so that you're slip stitching the same part of each X together. But stop me if I've said this before, this is really hard to do through a camera screen. So you will struggle less than me, I hope. In the center of the X stitches, I just go right through. I'm not worried about picking up the actual chains. You can do it cleaner than me if you want. Try not to pull your slip stitches too tight. The very last slip stitch is going to be the top of a treble crochet and the top of a chain 4. So there we go. That is now slip stitched together. Again, I am doing this whole thing inside out. You do not have to. I just find it easier. Okay, I have now turned my work. This is the armhole. You can see I still have that stitch marker in the bottom from before. This is the top shoulder. My yarn is still attached from slip stitching the top shoulder together. So we're going to do half double crochets around the entire armhole so that it's easier to work our X stitches into it on the next row. So for the half double crochets, this is also going to be a choose your own adventure step, but the only rule is a multiple of 3 plus 1. For clarification, here it is inside out again. This is the shoulder seam. This is the row of half double crochets around the armhole. This is the top of the arm here. So it looks like I did approximately 4 double crochets per side of the X stitch If you have to sneak in a few extra stitches or leave out a stitch to make sure you get to that multiple of 3 plus 1, it is really not a big deal. It's going to work itself out in the sleeve. All you want to do for going around the sleeve opening is make sure it's not too tight, make sure it's not too loose. Multiple of 3 plus 1. So I'll show you how I do that on the other sleeve. I'm going to put 106 half double crochets around the armhole because that is a multiple of 3 plus 1, and that is what works out for the size of armhole that I have. Your number is probably going to be different. All that matters is that it's spaced evenly, multiple of 3 plus 1. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. And I don't know if you've noticed, but the zooming in and out, the zooming out specifically, really kills the video quality, so I'm trying to show everything without cutting everything off. But let's half double crochet around. I'm going to chain 2. I'm so used to doing trebles, okay. I'm not going to count that as a stitch, but you can. Just depends on your preference and your style. So let's half double crochet around. I am going to mark that first one just for funsies. There are a lot of stitches. I don't want to get mixed up. I have now reached the bottom of the armhole where the original stitch marker is. It really doesn't need to be there anymore, I just left it. But this is where the side of the back starts. So I'm just going to add half double crochets as normal here, so it's going to be 6 half double crochets across. Your math may work out a little bit differently, but that works for me. This is also a good chance to crochet over any ends so that they're easier to weave in later. Okay, so I am 2 of these chain 4 spaces away from being back at the beginning. I have 98 stitches, so somehow I don't need to add any extra stitches because I need exactly, wow, I really questioned the math in my head for a second. This is basic addition. I need to get to 106. I need exactly 8 more stitches, so I'm putting 4 more stitches in each of these. I have found that 4 in each of these side spaces works out really well for my tension. Your tension might be totally different. Don't worry about it being 4 if that does not work for you. Again, just make sure it's even, a multiple of 3 plus 1. I keep repeating this. So we're going to do 8 more. Okay, then I'm going to slip stitch into the first stitch to finish the row. And here's where we start the sleeve. So I'm going to chain 4, and that will be the top of my sleeve. I have the chain 4 on the top of my sleeve. And then we're going to do the same thing as the very bottom of the cardigan, where we do that foundation row of the X stitches. So we're going to start in the next stitch, yarn over 2, go through that loop, pull up 1, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, skip 1 stitch, go into the next stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, 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 chain 1, yarn over, going sideways through the front there, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. The important part is that you're starting in the chain directly next to your chain 4, sorry, the stitch next to your chain 4. skipping one stitch between the two legs of the X and working into the next stitch. This is the same thing we did on the first row, but in case that was a long time ago, this is just a quick refresher. So I'm going to start the next X stitch directly next to the first one. The only gap is between the legs of the X. So I'm going to crochet around and come back. Okay, we're back around to the beginning. I'm just going to slip stitch into the top of this chain 4. Not on camera because that's hard for me to do. Wow, I did it so easy. No, just kidding. That's very hard for me. I don't know why. Okay, so we are going to now flip this around. We're going to look at the bottom of the arm and mark the bottom so that we know where to do the decreases. So you really just fold the whole thing in half, match up the holes between the X's so that you can be positive. I do this little walking motion with my fingers and it makes it a little bit faster. I don't know why I do that. Okay, so you're either going to end in an X stitch or you're going to end in a space between an X stitch. I'm ending in an X stitch. So I'm going to mark that with a stitch marker. Y'all are not going to believe it, but I have another sticky note for this. I'll explain, I promise. But if your sleeve is already the size you want it and you want a straight sleeve with no decreases, I should have told you before we marked the bottom, you don't have to do any of this. You can just X stitch around, do the chain 4, X stitch around, and do your entire sleeve that way. If you want to do the decreases, stay with me here. But if you don't want or need any decreases, you can skip to the next section. Honestly, the very end, the finishing. But if you want to decrease, let's go. Okay, so if you start with an odd number of stitches, stay with me here. If you start with an even number and your stitch marker is in between X's, catch us back at this timestamp. So basically, odd people, I'm going to get you even, and then we will meet back up with the even people. So let's look at this. The simplest way I could think of to lay this out is literally just X's and upside down Y's and one chain. So because I have an odd number of stitches, I am going to turn this X stitch in my next row into an upside down Y stitch. That way, in my next row, I can skip right over it without there being a big gap. So let me crochet around to this point, and then I will show you how I do that. Okay, I'm back. I have crocheted around. I am at the very bottom underarm section of my sleeve. So in the marked X stitch, I'm just going to leave the stitch marker there for the moment. I'm going to work around it. But I am going to put an upside down Y stitch, which is just an incomplete X stitch. So you start normally. This is going to be the same thing we did for the decreases on the front, the same type of, I totally missed the stitch there. So this is going to be the same type of upside down Y stitch we did for the decreasing on the front panels. You just stop when you have this upside down Y. You do not do the chain 1 that you would do next if you were doing an X. You just leave it. We're trying to make it as narrow as possible at the top so when we skip over it, it doesn't leave a gap in the next row. So I'm going to go ahead and yarn over twice, do my next X stitch. I'm going to leave my stitch marker in the row below just because I find that enough of a reminder for me. If you want to move yours up to the upside down Y stitch, you absolutely can. But here you can see we have an X, upside down Y, and an X. In the next row, we're going to skip right over this upside down Y. We're going to do an X stitch in the top of this X stitch and an X stitch in the top of this X stitch. And you can see that that is this row here. So I'll crochet around, and when I get to about here, I will hop back on and show you how we do that. Okay, I'm back. I've crocheted around. I am at the X stitch right before our upside down Y. So here I can show you a little bit better. All I'm going to do is do a regular X stitch into the top of this X stitch. Ignore this upside down Y completely. Do a regular X stitch in the top of this X stitch. And you can see how that's written out here. We have the upside down Y. Just kidding, no we don't. This will bring us to an even number of X stitches. So I'll show you how that looks in real life. I really hope that little diagram is helpful. Okay, so here's that upside down Y stitch, ignoring it. And now we have an even number of stitches. So I'm going to crochet around the rest of the row, and then I will come back and we will bring back the people who started with an even number, and we will all proceed from there. I am so silly. I could have been using this demonstration swatch the whole time. So we started with an odd number in the middle, very middle. We took that down to an upside down Y, skipped it, and that brought us to an even number of X stitches. So welcome back, even number people. We're here with you now with an even number of X stitches. I'm also going to give you a clear shot of this if it makes sense to you and you'd like to screenshot it or copy it down. This is as clear and as still of a shot as I can get. So moving on, if you are an even number of X stitches person, we're going to start here. So we are here. We have an even number of X stitches. The next row, we're going to do something kind of silly. Let me show you. So if this was your actual sleeve, it would be in the round. You would chain 4 and then continue in the round. This flat swatch is obviously going to be a little bit different, but not so different that I can't show you the technique. Also, I will absolutely be writing out the sleeve decrease instructions in the description because I realize this is the most complicated part of the pattern. And if you can't follow it from a sticky note, I don't blame you at all. But I am going to say now out loud for everyone, please do not ask me to turn this into a written pattern. It is just not feasible. Not only are there so many options, since this is really made to measure with a lot of different changes you can make, I also am just not a pattern designer. I am really testing the limits of my skill set with this tutorial, so I do not trust myself to write a pattern. That is not something I know how to do. That's not something I'm going to learn how to do, but I will write out the sleeve decreases in actual crochet terms. So we are at the middle 2. I should have a stitch marker there for clarity. So we're at the middle 2. So what we're going to do is do an upside down Y stitch here and an upside down Y stitch here with a chain 1 in between them. And you can kind of see why. It's because we're going to do an X stitch into the top of the upside down Y stitches, and we need that chain between the two legs of the X. So an upside down Y stitch, chain 1, and an upside down Y stitch. Then we're going to continue with the with the regular X stitches for the rest of the row. And since your sleeve is in the round, you will just do the entire rest of the round, and then when you get back to the bottom section, get back to your stitch marker. I will move this up 1 to right in between. I'm just putting it in that chain 1 between the upside down Y stitches. I put it through the yarn, don't worry about that. So the next row, we can see we're going to do an X stitch into the top of the upside down Y stitches. So we'll do our regular X stitches up until that point. I am actually going to take the stitch marker out because it's going to get in the way of the next stitch. I'm going to yarn over twice. I'm going to treat this as if it's the top right leg of an X. And this as if it's the top left leg of an X. I'm just putting a regular X stitch there. 2 upside down Ys turn into 1 X. I'm going to finish the row. So now we're back down to an odd number. So you can see that these 2 rows and these 2 rows are functionally the same. There has just already been 1 decrease in this example. So we're doing the same thing if you were already here for the odd number section. If you are just joining us from the even number section, in the center, very bottom, I should mark that again, we are going to put an upside down Y stitch so that in the next row we can skip it without there being a gap. So you do your regular X stitches until you get to your stitch marker. Into the marked X, we're going to put an upside down Y. Upside down Y is just an incomplete X. We stop here. We do not add the chain 1 that we would for an X stitch. We just continue with the next X stitch. And then you crochet around until you get to your stitch marker again. So as you can see in this row, we are just skipping the upside down Y stitch. Just doing a regular X stitch in top of the X stitch as normal. You skip the upside down Y stitch completely. Do another X stitch on the other side. I'm doing the chain 4 at the end just for consistency of this example swatch. Ignore that. And there you go. So this will decrease 1 X stitch every other row. It's a very gradual, seamless decrease. And you just continue this pattern, because you'll see this brought us from odd to even. So you can just start over at this row. And you can just continue these decreases until you're happy with the width of your sleeve. Because it is so gradual, with my really wide sleeves, I just decrease for the entire sleeve, and then it brings it to a nice taper that again is not too drastic. But you can decide how many rounds of decreasing you want to do, and then if it gets to a width you like, you just switch to crocheting X stitches in every X with no more decreases, and that's it. So go ahead and crochet the sleeve to a length you like. If you are adding a button band or wide ribbing to the center opening, take that into account. Your sleeves may end up a little bit too long if you do not take that into account. So I will meet you back when you have your sleeves or sleeve done, and I will show you how to finish the sleeves. Okay, so you can see I now have 2 sleeves. I turned the whole thing right side out. This was all worked inside out. That's why the seams at the top, I didn't turn it right side out right after that. I waited until I was done with the sleeves. So to finish the sleeves, I personally did, let me zoom in, 2 rows of half double crochets around the edge. I did, if I'm remembering correctly, in every top section where there are 3 stitches that you can crochet into, I did 3 and then 2 and then 3 and then 2 so that it would cinch just a tiny bit. You can do however many decreases you would like if you want for this to cinch more, but that was just my preference. You can tell I've worn and washed this a couple times. It's been a minute. Hey, I'm back. We're finishing the tutorial, I promise. So that's how I finished the sleeve. You can also absolutely do ribbing. I will show a ribbing demonstration in just a moment. But for the sleeve ribbing, if you want it to really cinch, you're gonna wanna use at least 2 sizes down from whatever crochet hook you were using. You may have to experiment a little bit with that. But I will show how to do the ribbing in general. How I finished the rest of the cardigan was also just 2 rows of half double crochet. I did this little tie in the center, and I just did this on the 2nd row of half double crochets. All the tie is, so I was half double crocheting along, came to the point where my decreases started. I chained the length that I wanted the tie to be, plus a little bit because it shrinks, and did a single crochet all the way back down the chain, and then started my half double crochets again. I didn't do a specific demonstration of that because I feel like explaining it is hopefully clear enough. If you do have any questions on anything, obviously feel free to ask them in the comments, but
Yep, just half double crocheted around the entire opening twice. If you'll remember, we started with a half double crochet at the bottom, so the bottom only needed one more row of double crochet. Sorry, half double crochet. So that is my entire cardigan. I now have a short version with the ties and the long version with the ribbing and buttons. So let me go ahead and show you how to do the ribbing. I will use the orange swatch again so that it's visible. Okay, so in this example, this swatch, this is still the bottom of the cardigan, the very bottom edge. And then we're going to use this side as the inside edge of the cardigan, the opening where the ribbing would go. So I find it much easier to do the ribbing if you have some regular stitches to work into rather than the sides of treble crochets and this chain 4. So whether you're doing ribbing or some other type of finishing, you're gonna want to do something around this inside edge. So for this example, I'm just going to do a single crochet, and because these are each 4 chains in theory, I'm just going to single crochet 4 into each of these openings. You can space them out a little bit, do like 3 here, 1 in this gap, you know, whatever looks best with your tension. And because I have the half double crochets at the bottom, I'm going to work in, I think, 2 more. You just want to have it even. Just enough stitches along this edge that evens it out a little bit. It will look a little bit wobbly still, but that will even out as you do your ribbing or after blocking or washing in general. So now that we have a cleaner edge to work into, we're going to start the ribbing. So I'm going to work from this side. I am going to start, this is just basic ribbing, by the way. I'm not going to do anything special, so if you already know how to do ribbing, you don't have to watch this, I promise. We're going to start by chaining the length that we want our ribbing to be, or I guess that would be the width of the ribbing. Oops, I wasn't counting. Okay, so I chained 6. You're going to want to chain your desired width of your ribbing plus 1 for your turning chain. So I'm actually going to chain 1 more. Let's make this a 6 plus 1. So you're actually going to be working back along this chain and then attaching that to the existing piece as you go. So why am I yarning over? Okay, so for the chain, I'm just going to work into the top loop because this is eventually going to be worked into the back loop only, but I'm just going to single crochet back down this chain 6 times. I have now single crocheted all the way back down. We are going to skip this first stitch that the chain is sort of attached to. And I'm going to slip stitch into the next single crochet from before. I'm also going to slip stitch into the next one so that I can flip my work around and single crochet in the back loop only down this ribbing again. And by again, I mean for the first time, sorry. We're adding another row to this little extension of the main piece. We are single crocheting into the back loop only 6 times. If you prefer, on the final stitch, you can
single crochet through both loops. I find that makes it look a little bit cleaner. There we have 2 rows of ribbing. So I'm going to chain 1 and flip everything over again. So we are now going to start with either a single crochet through both loops if you prefer, or just through the back loop, and then the rest of the stitches will be through the back loop only. And then I kind of have to pull on the stitches to make sure I'm looking at the correct one. When you pull on the stitches, the previous single crochet that you've worked into will be easier to tell. Sometimes I get a little mixed up there. So I'm going to slip stitch into the next single crochet from the from the main body of the work. And then I'm going to slip stitch again into the next single crochet. And then we're going to turn, and we are going to keep doing the same thing. Single crocheting into the back loop only. And if you prefer, doing a regular single crochet into that final stitch. So I'm going to continue that pattern, and I'll show you a better example once I have more rows to show you how it looks. Okay, a few more notes before I get too far. You'll see that I'm using the same size crochet hook as I did for the rest of it. It ends up being pretty even. This is just naturally a little bit tighter because it's not a big open mesh stitch, but I found it looks pretty normal on the finished garment. I don't know how else to explain it. I have never had any issue with that, but if you do have any issues with this cinching up too much in a way you don't like, feel free to size up a hook. If you want it to cinch, especially along the bottom, you can do ribbing on the bottom too. Definitely size down a hook if you want it to cinch in a little bit. So a couple things to look out for as you are doing this ribbing. When you are working from the outside back in, it's really beneficial, I think, to count your stitches as you go, because I personally find it really easy to accidentally work into these slip stitches at the end, the ones that connect the ribbing to the body of the work. So we're at 4, 5, and 6. It is easy to accidentally work into that slip stitch if it's like any looser than mine. And then we're slip stitching 2 at the end. So when you flip it, it's very important to remember to skip these 2 slip stitches. We're not working into those, we're working into the last stitch of the ribbing itself, not those 2 slip stitches. And this is by no means the only way to do crochet ribbing. This is just how I do it personally. I should also show you how to make a buttonhole, so we'll do that on the next row. If you want to add buttons, you're going to want to mark ahead of time where you want your buttons. Let's say I want one in this row because I'm running out of rows. Your button placement is completely up to you. I would usually do one at the point where your decreases start as the highest button, and then usually one very close to the bottom, but that one is less necessary. The one at the point where the decreases start is pretty standard and keeps it from having like weird gaps. But overall, the button placement, button size, number of buttons, that is all up to you. So I'm going to do 1 regular crochet, that may be for you in the back loop only, and then 1 in the back loop only. I want my buttonhole to be 2 stitches long. You may want yours to be longer, probably not shorter. I'm going to, instead of crocheting those 2 stitches, I'm going to chain 2 and skip 2 stitches and then continue working into that next stitch. And then I finish out the row. Got a little knot. So you can see I have my regular stitches, chain 2, skip 2, regular stitches. Still going to attach that to the work the same way we always would. Flip it, and I'm just going to work into these stitches the same way I worked into the rest of them. Whoops. For the chains, if you find it difficult to work into just the side, you can crochet around the chain. It's not going to look too strange or different than the rest. So this is how it looks if you work around the chain. I'll go back and work through the chain. I struggle so much with crocheting into the chain. Starting every project is a struggle. And that is how it looks if you work into what would be the back loops of the chain. So that does look a little more consistent with the rest of the piece, but again, I don't think it's a huge deal, especially if buttons are going to be covering it. That is up to you. So that is just about all I have to say about ribbing. One final note on the ribbing. I'll show you. If you are doing ribbing along the side all the way up across the back, this corner can be a little confusing. What I usually like to do is do my ribbing all the way up to here and skip 1 in the very corner as I'm slip stitching to the body of the work. I will skip at least 1 in the corner. Sometimes I'll skip 1, slip stitch 1, skip 1, slip stitch 1, just so there's not extra fabric in this corner that can cause some like bunching. One last note, if you're doing a button band and ribbing along the bottom, just know that it is standard to do the bottom ribbing first so that your button band extends the entire length of the cardigan. You can do it the other way, but then you can't have a button at the very bottom if you want one there. This feels like kind of an anticlimactic end to the tutorial, but that really is the end. You just weave in your ends, block your project. With this cotton and acrylic blend, I don't block it, I just wash it, and that really evens out the stitches. The cat hair is optional. I do recommend it. But yeah, I will show you how the finished piece looks on. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Okay, throwing it to the me with a face instead of the me who's just hands. Okay, bye. Okay, hopefully we all made it through that. Thank you for your patience if you made it this far. If you make one of these cardigans or any variation of this cardigan, I definitely want to see it. I'll leave all my taggables below so that you can tag me and I can hopefully share it. I anticipate there will be plenty of questions. I typically have pretty particular ways of describing things that don't connect with everyone, so obviously feel free to ask those questions. If you are making this and you found alternate ways to do things, little tips and tricks, feel free to leave those in the comments for other people as well. I will do my best to answer all the questions I get, but with all of that information, be free and go make all the mesh cardigans. All right, I will see you in the comments and I will see you next time. Bye.